Some of you guys may have seen this video floating around from Reventure Consulting saying that the Boise housing market is overvalued. And yes, it is overvalued. Some of the pieces it's talking about Boise specific. He uses Zillow, we use the MLS. And when you look at the data from the MLS, you're gonna see that the data is worse than what he is stating. Yes, he is right on a lot of things, but his data is a little bit off. We're gonna use data from the MLS. And the data from the MLS will might scare you on what's going on in the Boise housing market.
That's a signal that the market's still overvalued, particularly in a metro area like Boise, everyone. Boise, Idaho has a special place in my heart. It was actually one of the first cities I started talking about on YouTube 2 to 3 years ago when I started posting videos.
Now, something that I really appreciate is that he is saying that the Boise housing market is overvalued. We've been talking about the Boise housing market being overvalued over the last year and a half. It's encouraging to see somebody like him who's a bigger channel, has a lot more data, covers a lot more area, agreeing with something we've been talking about for years.
Boise, Idaho has a special place in my heart. It was actually one of the first cities I started talking about on YouTube 2 to 3 years ago when I started posting videos. And I would predicted that Boise was in a big housing bubble and then it wouldn't last. And sure enough, if we look at data here on Reventure app by metro area, we can see prices in Boise are down 11% from peak. That's one of the largest drops in home prices in America since the middle of 2022. And
So we've been talking about this. We have been talking about this, and now somebody else is coming and saying the Boise housing market has had the most significant drops. He says that the drops have been 11%. But what you're gonna find out, let's just jump into this data right now. For single family, the median sales price at the peak was $592,000. So that was for single family homes. And at the bottom was in January of 2023, where resales were at $487,000. So we're talking about a 19% price cut. And keep in mind, when sellers were selling, they were giving away on average 2 to 3% in seller concessions to help people buy down the interest rate. So it could be as much as 21% from the peak to the trough in Ada County for single family.
Zoom in further here on Reventure app and look at the different zip codes in Boise. We can see that there's areas that have dropped by as much as nearly 15%. Like in Star, Idaho to the west, prices are down 15% from peak. So we've had some fairly substantial declines here throughout the Boise area over the last year and a half. But what's interesting is that due to these declines in prices in Boise over the last year, we've seen a lot of sellers on the market now go on strike.
Now, we've been talking about sellers going on strike, but let me show you why the data shows that the sellers are going on strike and why the median sales price might be a little bit higher than what it is. So we're again just gonna look at Ada County. When we break out the resale homes versus the new construction homes, the reason why we do that is because the resale homes are the current sellers, the sellers that are reselling their houses. And like he says, they're on strike. And yes, there are many sellers who are on strike, but there's a lot of sellers who realize I have to sell and they're taking a loss. So what we can see is that the median sales price has increased by $10,000 from $499 to $509 in November of 23. But the thing that I find fascinating is we look at the closed sales volume. Our closed sales volume is down 18% year over year. So in 2022, our sales were right around 5,652. And so far this year, we've only seen 4,627. If we were to jump back in 2021, our sales were even higher. So we're seeing a significant demand in buyers continue to drop. But the thing that jumped out to me the most is new construction. You see, when we break down new construction versus resale, new construction peaked in June of 22 at $690,000. Then in January of 23, it dropped all the way to $495,000. And now in November, what we're seeing new construction sitting at is $575,000. We had a huge drop from peak to trough, and year over year, we're down 7.8%. But our number of sales, and this is what's fascinating, the number of sales is on the decline. The new construction are more willing to give away things. If you've been following our channel, you know that the new construction on average is giving away anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 that isn't in this median sales price. And so when you take that away, we're talking about the median sales price for new construction is actually sitting around $525,000. Now, I want you to think about the people who were on strike, the sellers who were on strike that bought a new construction home 2 years ago. Or even if they have a resale home within a new construction community and they're saying, hey, I'm not gonna sell for less than what I bought it for 2 years ago. These people are gonna be in more world of hurt than those who are saying, okay, I realize the time, I just gotta sell it for what it is. And those sellers who are on strike can only be on strike for so long unless interest rates drop significantly or we see a huge another influx of buyer demand from out of state.
A lot of the sellers on the Boise housing market, they know that the downturn is here, and as a result, they're refusing to list their homes. The new listings in Boise are way, way down, with data from Redfin showing that new seller listings are down 20% over the last year and are down by 50% from where they were in 2021. So the sellers in Boise are on strike, which means that the inventory levels of homes for sale have dropped back down to a more normal level, which is creating the impression of a more balanced market, where there's some people now in the Boise market who think a recovery is occurring due to the decline in inventory. As you can see right now in the Boise metro, there's 2,200 homes for sale. This 2,200 homes for sale is down from the 3,600, a record amount last year. Well, now we're back down towards what, the long-term average is. So roughly average amount of inventory is now in the market. Clearly way more homes for sale today than there were in 2022 when there was only 800 homes for sale. So it's not like we're going back to the pandemic in Boise, but the inventory is just more back to normal.
Even though our inventory is getting back to normal, something I gotta show you is I'm gonna pull up these stats from 2021 to 2022 to now, and you're gonna see how significantly the buyer demand has dropped. And we're just gonna look at Ada County for right now. So in Ada County, in 2021 and 2020, there was 11,400 homes sold or closed in November by November of 2020. In November of 2021, it was 9,888. So do you see that there has been a drop, a 13% drop, as a matter of fact? But let's jump into November of 2023 and see how many homes have been sold year to date. And they're sitting right around 6,942. So we're talking about from almost 11,000 people moving to the area in Ada County and buying a home, almost 11,400, and it has dropped all the way down to almost 7,000 homes sold. That's 4,000 home difference, or 4,500 homes in difference of being sold. So our buyer demand is almost cut in half. Not quite. We needed it to drop a little bit more, but 4,000 people less bought a home in Ada County now than they did in 2020. So we can see, although inventory is dropping, that the buyer demand is even lower right now. We're talking about a 38% drop in buyer demand, or homes closed. That is an insane amount of number from 2020 to now. So if this trend continues, we're gonna see even more pain coming in 2024. Although inventory's back to normal, you gotta remember, if our inventory is normal but our buyer demand is down significantly, then that means that we're in for a world of hurt in 2024.
How are you going to know the difference between the two and make a more educated decision as a home buyer? Well, you have to look at the data for your neighborhood. And for this, we're going to go back to Boise just to show these differences, where you can see inventory versus average. Well, now in Boise, the inventory is down in Meridian compared to the long-term average. It's down further south in Kuna. It's down further west. However, the inventory is still up on the northern end of the city from the long-term averages. So what this means is that areas in blue, where the inventory is down, may be more likely to have stable prices. Areas in red, where the inventory is up, like in Emmett, more likely to have declining prices. And to see this just more visibly, let's pick the zip code down in Meridian, which is, I know, an area that a lot of you are looking at. You can
Something that he's talking about is breaking it out from community to community, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to look at Canyon County. So Canyon County is the neighboring county to Ada County, and what you're going to see is that maybe some of the prices have stabilized out in Canyon County. So for instance, our peak sales price happened in May of 22 at $460,000. So this is resale and new construction together. But what we're seeing right now, as of November of 2023, that the median sales price is $398,000, or $399,000. So there was a drop from a year ago, November of 2023. The median sales price for single family homes in Canyon County was $399,000. Well, in January of 2023, it was $395,000. So you're seeing that it's kind of stagnant, but is it? So let's break out the resale by new construction, because remember, sellers are on strike. So when we look at the new construction, January of 2023, the median sales price for new construction was $415,000. If we go to November of 2023, what we're going to see is, okay, the median sales price for new construction is $411,000. A lot of these builders are offering $20,000 to $40,000. And if you saw our video just last week, you saw that a person who bought a new construction home turned around and had to sell it at a short of $100,000 because they were upside down. All these other builders are giving incentives, the $20,000, $40,000, just to get you to move into their property. So it's something to be mindful of. But by looking at this data, one could argue that the Canyon County market is a little bit more stagnant. The buyer demand being right at the same, right? It has increased the number of sold units by 2% versus this same time last year. So one could argue that the buyer market in Canyon County is set. It has kind of gotten stagnant, and there isn't much movement, but we'll have to wait to see what happens. One thing that he's bringing up is when he's breaking it out by zip code. Now, a lot of people that we've helped relocate aren't necessarily looking at a zip code. They're looking at a certain area, like I want to live in the North End, or I want to live in the East End or Harris Ranch area, or I want to live out in Emmett. And now Emmett is a more rural area. You can't necessarily break it down by zip code. You have to maybe look more at a certain neighborhood. Like if you were to ask me, if you were to call me and say, hey Josh, what do you think of Harris Ranch? Well, Harris Ranch right now has lower inventory, even though it's showing here on his map that it has more inventory, as lower inventory, which is creating a market where the prices are not dropping as significant as maybe in Meridian or North Meridian, where there's a lot of new construction, and these new construction builders are giving away $20,000, $40,000.
Market is external migration and external demand. Because one thing is very, very clear when I look at the data, and you guys can let me know if you're in Idaho watching this video, if you agree with this, is the fact that the locals in Idaho don't have enough money to support this housing market. Because the median household income in the state of Idaho is $75,000. That's below the US average. You can see the median income in Idaho, it's actually less than it is in Georgia. It's the same as Pennsylvania and barely above Wisconsin. Yet the prices in Idaho are way higher than those states. So when we have incomes that are really, let's call it below average here, we got to scroll to the third page before Idaho shows up as far as median household income. We have home prices that are way above average. That means that the market's being supported by external people moving in, likely from states like California and Washington in particular. They've been the ones moving into Idaho over the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, buying up the homes and pushing up the prices. Now, the problem with that for a state like Idaho is that we're starting to see a reversion in that migration demand. Like we're seeing now that the pandemic is over, not as many people move in from California, but we're also seeing more people move back. Whereas Redfin had an article that came out a couple months ago talking about how 1 in 10 home sellers are moving because they're being called back into the office. In particular, they talked to a Redfin agent in Boise who said that they had sellers who both work at the same company, which told them they have to be in the office 3 days a week or lose their jobs. This was back in Seattle, and so they have 6 months to make the move. They ended up having to sell their house in Boise, and they took a $100,000 loss on their home due to companies like Amazon, Apple, Goldman.
So this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about for a long time, and many of you guys even share your growing pains of, man, I am born and raised here in Idaho and I can't afford it. And when the median household income is $75,000, as you saw, we are one of the lowest as far as the median household income. But yet our home values on his map, as he showed you, is higher than many other states that are at the same median household income. And so when we cannot afford, our locals cannot afford, and we are expecting these outside sources to bring and buy these houses up, well, as you can see, they're drying up. In many, many, many cases, we've helped people have to sell their house and move back to an area. And so some of these people, let me give you an example. We went to a listing appointment and we told these people, hey, listen, I understand you bought it at X, but these new construction homes right here are selling for less than yours, and yet they are nicer and bigger. And when somebody's looking at a house and like, okay, I'm gonna look at a house that's maybe 2 years old. It's already been used, there's no warranty on it, it's been it's been roughed up around the edges, or I can buy a brand new house and I can actually spend less on that brand new house than a resale house. Most people are gonna go with that new construction house. So we end up losing the listing, and this person has been trying to sell their house for over a year, and now they're selling it, now they have it listed for less than what we originally recommended because they waited so long. They were on strike, and now they're gonna end up losing more money because they didn't listen to us when we originally met with them. And yes, this is one of many cases where people moved here, thought they liked the area, and now they're moving back to California. His point and his example from Redfin of people moving here, having an out-of-state income, moving here, and now they're being called back to the office, or they didn't like the area, and taking like this example, they took $100,000 loss on their home in order to go back to work. That is true, as we've seen it firsthand.
So on the market, let's just take a look and find something that's kind of middle of the pack, folks. This house here, $470,000 in Boise. There was a $20,000 price cut a couple weeks ago. Now, interestingly, we can see that the current value of this house is actually lower than it was back in April 2021. So that's kind of significant, folks. Some of these houses in Boise now are worth less than they were all the way back almost 3 years ago. So, there have been some substantial gains in affordability. However, when you look at the mortgage payment here, you still see it'll be $2,800 a month. And that's with the recent drop in interest rates. Right now, I put a 6.7% mortgage rate in here. $2,800 a month, $33,000 a year.
So something that I have to bring up, because he missed, in my opinion, he's missed two things. One, when he's talking about that this home has dropped 3 years worth of value, What about all those people that bought? What about all those people that bought and now all of a sudden they have to move back, so they lose the equity that they have in their house, if they have equity in their house. But let's just say all these people, we read a stat from Boise Regional Realtors, 8,000 people buy in 2022 in Ada County. We had 7,000 people buy in 2023. In 2021, we had almost 10,000 people buy. And now what we're seeing is that home values have dropped almost to the beginning of 2021 levels, and those people who bought may have zero equity left in their house, especially if they use a first-time homebuyer program where you only have to put 0.5% down. So these people are gonna be in trouble if they come to a hardship and they have to sell their house. The other thing that I wanna bring up is he's using a mortgage calculator. And in his mortgage calculator, when he's trying to break down a payment, something I noticed is that he's using a 20% down payment. Now, many of you guys know who are putting yourself and getting yourself ready to buy a house are saving up to put 20 or more % down. But a lot of people that have bought over the last couple of years are first-time homebuyers just trying to squeeze into the market. So they might only be putting 5% down. So when he's using the payment of $2,700 a month, he's using that payment as if they were putting 20% down. So let me pull up a mortgage calculator and let's just put in the average down payment of 5%. 5% down payment on a $470,000 purchase actually makes your monthly payment $3,500 a month. That equates to $42,000 a year. So we're talking about an average house of $470,000, 5% down. Your monthly payment is $3,500 a month. Now, I do appreciate, we're gonna jump into how he's gonna break down what it makes more sense to do rather than buying, as we've been preaching this and talked a lot of people out of buying a house and into renting. Because when you break down the same style of house, if you could rent that same size of house versus buying it. So let's jump into it.
Least, let's just say 1,800 square feet, you can see that you can rent a similar house, similar size for $2,200.
So do you see that? You can buy that house at $3,500 a month, and any repairs, anything breaks, you're on the hook for it. Or you can turn around and rent that house at $2,200 a month. Now, that may not be that much significant, but we're talking about a 38% savings by renting instead of buying right now. And that's what I'm talking about why this market is so overvalued. And it does not make sense if you're financing with 5% down to go out and buy a house. We're talking about a 38% savings or $1,300 a month.
Too negative on Idaho either in this video. I think there are a lot of good things going for Idaho's housing market in the long term, talking maybe 10, 15, 20 years. Idaho is a growing state. It seems to have pretty sensible state economic policies, lots of businesses like moving there. There's a budding startup culture. And so I think there are positives to Idaho, particularly with that population growth.
I am a firm believer long term Boise is gonna be the best market. But short term, it does not look that way. We'll have to come back and look at the data like we do every single week, every single month, every couple months to see what is the market doing. And again, I am a believer long-term in investing in the Boise market. Just like he's saying, it's not all bad news. But right now, it could be bad news to buy a house when we're seeing people lose their houses. And so we have to watch it. We got to see what's going to go on. We got to see if buyer demand is going to pick back up. I mean, heck, we're going into an election year. Last time we went into election year, what happened? After the new president got elected, boom. Everybody got shut down and people started moving in droves to Boise, Idaho. We're going into election year. Is that going to happen again? I don't know. But I do believe in 10, 15 years, Boise is still going to be a good market. It's just is now a good time to make a move in this market. If you are considering to buy a house, you really have to think 10 years. Am I okay being in the spot, being in the house that I'm buying for 10 years or more? Because as we're going to see these declines potentially continue to come, you have to be okay being stuck there. And so if you're going to make a move, just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Am I okay with paying a higher payment? Now, some people want to live in a certain area. Some people want to have land. Some people want to have a place where they can call home and they're raising their kids. They don't have to worry about getting kicked out because the landlord decides to sell. And I get that. But if you're going to make the move, make sure you're educated, you're doing your research, and the agent you hire is doing the same.